Order of business will be to have reports from the head of the working groups on the recommendations that they have arrived at. And first is Dr. Peterson. Are you? Okay, great. Nick Peterson, head of the racing equipment and safety.
All right. What we had was we had a very active group looking at this, and we really had 4 action items that are looking at the implementation here. One of the things that we thought was most important on the equipment safety is a process that can be used for implementing and tracking the standards for racing equipment. The action item associated with this is more than likely a new standing committee that will look at how to develop the steps to take something from a model rule to the implementation of the standards, and then working with NTRA and the accreditation or some other organization in order to make sure that the equipment is actually implemented with the intent of the rule. So there's really a monitoring process as the last stage of that. The second thing is, in order for the process to be data-driven, a rider injury database is a critical implementation piece. We need to know what are the risks and how those risks can be mitigated. A lot of these things we can implement before we have data because they're the low-hanging fruit. The more expensive or more complex issues, or the issues such as rider vests that may have complicating factors associated with them, we need to have the rider injury database to make sure that there are not unintended consequences. The next step is really a phased basis for implementation of the advanced safety. This committee needs to look at, we've got a huge number of these pieces that can be implemented, and it's sort of overwhelming when you look at the details one by one. Safety reins, we spent quite a bit of time on safety reins. There's some details that need to be worked out, but that was on the low-hanging fruit sort of. Track warning systems, consistency on that. And then finally, there's the people piece, and this overlaps with one of the other committees, but we felt like the priority on this was so high. And one of the issues here was safety committees at all tracks to focus on licensing experience and also post-meet lessons. If we, at the end of a meet, step back and say, what did we learn, what were the risks, what were any accidents that might have occurred, and then we can move forward. That allows the feedback loop to continue, because that on-track safety committee can then report back to the Welfare and Safety Summit Standing Committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. The next up is Dr. Rick Arthur, head of the Racetrack Environment and Training Practices Group.
Thank you. We have a few more slides than Mick did. The first recommendation is to formalize reciprocity for stewards, starters, and veterinarians lists nationally, so that if a horse is on the vet's list in California, horses can't start in Arizona until he comes off the vet's list in whatever manner is appropriate. Or if a horse is on the starter's list and goes someplace else, that the jock and the starter knows that that horse is a problem. This would be a pretty easy thing to address. We need to develop best practice documents for training practices, training counterclockwise, giving horses spells, all those type of practices, and make sure that the trainers communicate amongst themselves with their various ideas. Same issue with stable area design for safety and air quality, track maintenance procedures, make sure the trainers know what's going on with the racetrack, what its maintenance operations went on that day and that week, and biosecurity and disaster planning best practices as well. Next slide. Really, before we can develop a lot of these best practices, we need a real comprehensive database so we can make informed, accurate decisions. track maintenance procedures, training records, including training injuries. Committee thought this was very important. Veterinary records and how those veterinary records will be utilized, medication records, to try to put this entire picture together so we can develop what is the safest way to keep our horses healthy and sound. We also need to reevaluate some of our standard practices. Veterinary services is the model for providing veterinary services at the racetrack appropriate. The AAP has been looking at some of this previously. And reevaluate the racing office operation condition book. There's obviously a problem when racing secretaries can't fill races and trainers can't get horses in the races. And the last issue is one we talked about previously, to restructure the claiming regulations with the intent of disincentivizing running unsound horses and claiming races. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Now we have Wendy Davis from the Education Licensing and Continuing Education.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
I had one more slide I forgot about. There are two very simple issues that we think that we need to look at to get better data. Number one is to evaluate crop performance. Why are we not getting more horses to the races, even though more horses are going into training? And the second one is to evaluate with a cohort study the impact of high-intensity exercise in racing furlongs and see how that correlates to racing injuries. And those are fairly simple projects to undertake that will give us useful information.
Thank you. Now, Wendy.
Thank you. I think you'll see that some of the items that we dealt with are not new. Many of the ideas have been dealt with before, but it's always a tough task to get these implemented in the regulatory structure given all the different jurisdictions. So we started out looking at why some of the things, and first of all, you might have seen that our group in the past have not moved forward enough, and we haven't gotten some of our plans implemented. So we started by looking at what the barriers might have been and what some of the pushbacks were, and no surprise, personnel and funding at the regulatory level within the racing commissions, and also keeping track of this information. So our first bullet point, to create an advisory committee to address and determine content for continuing education as a mean to accreditation for trainers, grooms, farriers, and jockeys. We decided to take a little different approach to this, and instead of pushing the continuing education responsibilities on each individual commission, we would like to form a committee, and that would be made up of AAP, NTRA, blacksmiths, ARCR, jock skills, horsemen's groups, to look at taking this outside each regulatory body and create something similar to the Racing Officials Accreditation Program, which would ease the burden on the regulatory bodies, and hopefully that will help things move forward. That way the information and the task of getting the CE out would be held by this one organization, which would certainly increase the likelihood that any jurisdiction that would like to participate could. One of the things that we needed to look at, again, given the lack of time and available funding, was how to get educational programs out there. We looked at DVDs, simulcast, using our simulcast network, other online means, as well as live opportunities. Like yesterday would have been a fantastic opportunity for trainers to earn continuing education credit. So we will be looking at this. We have a short timeline. We've given ourselves 30 days to create the advisory committee to go to work on seeing how we might be able to put this together. And that might seem like it was putting the cart before the horse a little bit. We already also talked about the National Trainers Exam, And our goal is to endorse a national trainer's exam, which actually already exists. That was one of the tasks that was accomplished from the 2006 session here. And find a means to validate the test. That was suggested, and we all thought it was an excellent idea. It's not the content of the exam, but the quality of the instrument itself, and thought that that would be if we had somewhat a stamp of approval on just the quality of our exam, it would be a little bit easier to get more of the jurisdictions to adopt it. Through the ARCI and commissions, we are going to ask the different regulatory bodies to adopt this. And another way that we're going to try to get this jump-started was to identify some prominent participants in the racing industry, such as trainers and stewards, to increase the awareness and really up the PR for a national exam. Our target is to get the major racing jurisdictions to utilize this, and although it might be a lofty goal, we've given ourselves a year to have about 50% of the handle of the U.S., whatever those jurisdictions may be, to at least be in the process of adopting the national exam. So those are our projects for our group. Thank you.
Thank you. The video streaming of the next session will start for 5 minutes, so we better not jump the gun. But Mike Ziegler now is going to give a report on the transitioning thoroughbreds to second careers. And don't feel obligated to finish by 11 just because this TV show starts.
My watch says 7:30. I don't know what happened. So the transitioning thoroughbred to second careers group got together, and the initial target is to establish a standing committee made up of representatives of aftercare organizations as well as owners, trainers, and veterinarians with some racetrack representation to continually meet on a regular basis to try and move the ball forward regarding these issues. We'd also, like to create a track liaison position at every racetrack with that one individual who can own the issue and be the liaison between the racetrack owners and trainers and the organizations that that track chooses to work with, so that everybody on both sides of the fence knows who they can talk to try and match up homes. We would like to put out a best practice guideline, overarching best practices at the track level, how to establish funding, what's the best way to address responsible veterinary care, communications, education to let trainers know how they can help their horses continue to a second career. And the probably most important aspect of the best practice is coming up with strategies to give incentive to people to make sure that their horses have a second career. We're going to cooperate with the AAP in establishing some veterinary guidelines so that when a horse goes on to second career with some issue from its racing career, there will be knowledge as to what that horse is capable of doing in its second career. And finally, we hope to establish an accreditation program for facilities so that there can be comfort in knowing that the organization that your horse is turned over to is reputable and is doing right by the horse. Thank you.
Okay, are there any comments? Anybody have any qualms about being associated with any of these recommendations? Speak now, or and turn in your jacket if you have qualms. Go ahead. Yes, sir, Dr. Parkin. Mr. Remy? Okay, the question, the comment is there's a concern among trainers who feel they need to have a protection, that they make a good faith effort to protect the horse. They sign a contract with a rescue or retirement service, and then 2 owners later, something goes amiss. So, Mike, would you like to comment on that, or? Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate all your work this morning. I appreciate the work of the ladies and gentlemen who compiled it all for us and for you.